comes up, but go ahead. Hello, hello.
Perfect. All right. Well, we're live. Welcome back to This is Dundermoose. I am really excited for my guest tonight. A man of many names online, many hobbies. I think. Do you want me? How do you want me to refer to you tonight?
Stephen is fine.
All right, Steven, aka the Shadow over Sojenka, aka World of Weirth. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Is it
Yes.
Weirth or Weirth?
Weird. Like weird Earth.
Oh, gotcha. Um, Purple Druid, War Game. there's a lot. There's a lot going on here. We're gonna call you
There's a lot
Steven.
going on.
I am your host. This is Dundermoose, and I'm excited to talk to you. I think well, we've been friends on Twitter for a while now. But one of the things, yeah, Bob Stevens got the bottle ready. Oh man, that's an inside joke from something else. But the thing, the joke that caught our attention, and you probably don't want this dubious honor, but you are actually the primogenitor of the Desert Swamp hashtag.
I think
So do you
so.
want
I
to
think
take
you're
us
right.
through how on earth that came about?
Sure, sure. There were some people on Twitter talking about how exciting and fun it was to go into their sessions cold and just play D&D, rolling on random tables out of Appendix A and B and what have you. And I said that's just kind of silly.
Well, they
Um,
were they
you can
as
get a
per
result
Twitter.
like a desert next to a swamp, and people took that and ran with it. About 17 people said, "Oh, you never heard of the Nile?" And of course, I've heard of the Nile, but
Then that's not really a swamp, though, right? That's like a straight up.
no, it's not really a swamp. But it was an extreme example to make a point because if you're tooling along in the desert, as it were, with a
Hmm.
desert style adventure, and all of a sudden you roll up a swamp, then suddenly you have to explain why there's a swamp in the middle of this desert. And
Well, and there was immediately a schism, right? Like there was like Team Desert Swamp, and then there was also Team Swamp Desert.
correct,
But
right.
apparently, it only goes one way. Once you go swamp, you never go back, right? Like you can get to a
I think
swamp
so. I
from the
think so.
desert, but you cannot get from a swamp to the desert.
Should we look it up? I can look it up. I have.
You sure? Sweet, yeah, go for it. This is serious stuff. We need to get to the bottom
This
because
is
people
this
will
is
get
serious
upset
stuff
online. They'll say swamp
because
desert is
someone
not real D&D.
someone on the internet is wrong.
How dare they? Come to bed, honey. I can't. Someone on the internet is
All
wrong.
right. So if you're in a desert, you cannot get a forest result or a marsh result.
Okay.
And if you're in a marsh, then you can get any result: plain scrub, forest, rough, desert,
Okay.
hills, or
So,
more
so I
marsh.
had it backwards. It's not desert swamp. It's swamp desert.
Correct.
Okay. We
Well,
are getting to
well,
the bottom of the
I don't know.
issues
Is it
here.
is it a desert in the swamp? Is it a swamp desert where there's a desert in the swamp, or is it a desert swamp where it's a desert in the swamp? I don't know I don't know. I
I feel
think the
like the
schism.
desert is
I think
somewhat
the schism
larger.
remains.
I feel like a desert is larger than a swamp.
I feel you. Yes, I would concur with that.
Okay.
So, all right.
Well, solve that one. Take that, YouTube. Take that, Twitter or X or whatever you call yourself, whatever desert or swamp you are now. But it does get to this issue of no prep supremacy, right? Versus prep. And I feel like you come down on the prep side of that equation. And that's what I want to talk to you about.
Well, yes, I will say that yes, with the caveat that what do you mean by prep, and what do you mean by zero prep? Because I think those are very important terms. And if you go back through all those threads and those conversations, you can see that people are talking past each other
Yes.
because they mean different things to different people.
Exactly.
And for example, if you're running a campaign and you have a good map and you have an idea of what your setting is supposed to be like, what literature it's based on, or what aesthetic it's based on, then you can sit down and play a session where your players can go off and do whatever they want in a direction that you may not be prepared for, in terms of having, encounters or a dungeon or what have you. But because you know internally what's out there, you can do it, and you can use the encounter tables that you have selected, either with the rules that you have, with the terrain that you have, with the setting you created. You might have custom encounter tables that you created. Does that count as prep?
It's a good question.
Making those encounter tables. So when you have all those tools ready, then yes, you can run a session without preparing for the session in particular. But I would say if you were going to sit down at a table with a bunch of people cold and say, okay, we're in, let's open the book. You're, when we roll a die, okay, you're in the plains. Which way would you like to go? I think you're going to have a less pleasant experience.
Well, yeah, and that also gets into, like, you may, like, what do we call the time that you spend getting familiar with Appendix A? Right? Like,
Right, exactly.
Mr. Wargaming is doing, he's doing solo play to get better at AD&D First Edition.
Correct.
Right? And so a person who's put in the reps and put in the time with that appendix, when their players show up on game night, they're going to be able to fly through that part because they got the muscle memory, right? But a person who's that's a different level of prep or no prep than someone who's winging it and they're flipping around. They don't know what table follows what, which one goes for monsters, which one goes for treasure. And they may also be no prep in the sense of that session, but it's not going to be the same kind of experience for their players. I think Gelatinous Rube was getting into this a bit, saying that it's going to be the players waiting for you to roll dice and hem and haw before you tell them what's going on.
Right. There was a great tweet. It was like, okay, roll.
Yeah.
They kind of, went through the process, which I thought was hilarious because in my mind, that seems like that's exactly how it would work or not work, depending on point of view.
And then also the familiarity with the tables, as you said, if you're developing your own table, is that considered prep or is that considered not prep?
Yeah. I mean, I would call that prep.
Yeah.
And then you can have, Alexander McCrease, you can have his philosophy where he enjoys the prep and he does the prep for entertainment, which is part of what I do as well. I mean, I almost hesitate to show you, but when I started the World of Worth campaign about 3 years ago, at the time we had just moved and I was not working and I was also kind of on disability at leave for a thing. But anyway, so I wasn't working. I had every day, all day free. And so I did
time and mental space, right?
I had a ton of maps. I mean, I made like 50 or 60 hexes worth of maps. And we're talking about, 5 mile hexes.
Okay.
And I made a lot of them, but I didn't have anything else to do. I couldn't work. And so I prepared a campaign.
All right. So having established that we are dealing with a force for prep here, my next question is, if I want to go team prep, how do I prep like a boss?
It's easier than you think. There is, I should have looked it up. You can go the Gygax 75 route.
Oh yeah.
And if you Google that, you can download a free one on itch.io. And
someone in the chat find the find
I think it's Ray. Is it Ray Otis? Ray's.
Yeah.
He's got it's a free download, and it walks you through Gary Gygax's process. Make a little town, make a little area, make a little dungeon, how to theme it. It's a fun thing. We did it as an exercise. A few of us did it, kind of a blog exercise a couple years ago. It was a lot of fun. And that's one good way to get started. Another, this is how I do it, and this is what because when I started, let me take a step back.
Right.
When the Lost Dungeon of Tanaspor came out, I had mentioned that I was getting it, and that I wanted to run it, and I wanted to use some old school rules. And if anybody wanted to come on board, let me know. And so I got a whole bunch of people that were interested in doing it. So we decided to run that with Blueholme, and I started preparing that in March of this year when I got the book. And so one of the first things I did was I made a regional map, and I'm going to hit present and let's see if this works.
All right. I may have to click a button to get it on the screen.
Share screen. It's easier with two monitors.
Yeah, there's always that little pop-up that shows up.
There we go.
While you're getting that, there was a question in the chat, and we can answer it or table it if it takes us too far off topic. But Bureau Man says, would you say the rule set is complete if you can both play with a group or solo without any need for external references, i.e. just relying on the tables?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be the definition of complete, right?
With the corollary, would you also say that one that doesn't have such qualities could be considered incomplete? Because I know there's like systems that are just meant for the tables, right? Like the Mythic GM Simulator,
Sure.
or
and there are some that are specifically for solo play,
or just for hex crawling, or I mean, didn't the original OD&D, didn't they like reference another tabletop game for like, okay, whenever you're doing your wilderness survival, just get a copy of this game?
Yeah.
Oh, here we
absolutely.
go.
Yeah,
I guess. Yeah.
Okay, so there we are. So what I did.
That's a good looking map.
Yeah, thanks. What I did was I took the outdoor survival map and I flipped it over, and then I turned the bottom edge into a coastline. And so if you look at this, this snake-like ridge here on the left-hand side, that's added in. But basically, this forest and those mountains, those match up hex for hex on the outdoor survival map.
Okay.
And then at the little point there where that bay goes and starts the river, that's the main city of the campaign. And on an island out there in the bay, that is where the Lost Dungeon of Tanasporg is, under the ruined castle of Tanasporg.
Oh, okay.
And so I had so much interest in people wanting to play the game that I actually am running 2 sessions a week, one on Tuesday and one on Thursday.
All right. And are they each in their own instance of the game, or are they both in the same game world?
They are in a shared instance. They live in the same world. They're in the same region, and they've crossed paths a few times. How did I think that up?
Question.
I just thought it'd be easier. I thought it'd be easier to do it that way than to try to run 2 separate campaigns, and then have 2 sets of NPCs and 2 sets of different relationships.
All right. So you're doing Blueholme.
And because I'm also using the 1-1 downtime pacing, which
there it is,
really makes it all possible. Because I don't say 1-1 timekeeping anymore, because I don't think that is an accurate reflection of at least the way that I manage the calendar for my campaign.
Tell me more about how the pacing versus 1-1 timekeeping.
Well, in a session, time can go fast or time can go slow. They may. They can travel 100 miles if they want to, and we can do that in a few minutes. We can make a few encounter rolls. Maybe they see something, maybe they don't.
Yeah.
And that could take a week or 2 weeks or however long it takes, for whatever method of travel they have.
Yeah.
So I try to keep it, though, within 2 to 3 weeks amount of time that you spend or passes in a session, so they don't get too far ahead of the timeline.
You don't get too much time debt going on. Yeah.
Right.
So for the most part, though,
at the end of the
go ahead. I don't want to talk. I was going to say, for the most part, time away from the table passes at 1-to-1 with the actual calendar.
Correct.
So game time is world time, and so that would necessitate then that people have multiple characters in case someone's in traveling time jail, but they want to play again.
Correct. Yeah, everyone has multiple characters. the Tuesday group and the Thursday group approach their multiple characters in different ways,
Yeah.
and I allow it because that's what they want to do, and that's a-okay. The Tuesday group, they run theirs more troop style, where they may take, characters A, B, C, and D and go do something for 10 days. And so 7 days later, when it's time to play, they'll use characters, X, Y, Z.
Okay.
The Thursday group, they have multiple characters, but they also like to run them all at the same time.
Oh.
Sometimes, one will be out for training, or one or two might go off and do a separate thing. But generally speaking, they'll run two characters in a session. I
All right. I'm not trying to stir the pot or get anyone in trouble. But as a DM, do you have a preference over the way the two different groups run? Like, do you prefer when you're playing with your character, you get one for the session, or do you like it when they're like, well, I got 3 guys available this week, I'm going to run all 3 of them? And just no players, he still loves you if he doesn't pick your group.
No, they're different. They're different games. The Tuesday session is almost like a different campaign than the Thursday session, just because the style of play is different, the mode of play is different. The Thursday group I've actually been playing with for over 3 years now, and so we know each other really well, and they've evolved into this play style. They've grown from having 1 character to 2 and sometimes 3, which is fine.
Do you ever get people that aren't used to that?
We do training. We do training time, and we do grading for sessions, which I know is not a Blue Home thing. But if you have a character in the session, you say you're running 3 characters, but you only mention 2 of their names during the session, and the third one kind of just drags along, he's gonna get penalized for his grade.
Right on.
So that does happen.
So it's a risk reward thing. Do you ever have guys having 2 of their dudes loan the third one money to level up, pay for his training?
Yes, actually, both groups run a common pool of funds.
Okay.
That they draw from, so that when it is time, because they tend to level up at different rates, especially, for instance, especially the Tuesday group, because they travel in a mixed group of characters, and it's almost always a different group. So sometimes people are leveling up, and so they kind of rotate through. But yeah, they create a pool of gold. And sometimes, even like magic items, they have a suit of magic armor and a magic shield, and so that goes into their armory. And whoever needs it when they go out onto an adventure will take it.
That's cool.
It's a literal armory too, because they're building a stronghold, and so it literally is an armory.
Have you ever had the 2 parties like interact with each other? And is it like, how do you handle it when like Thursday group comes up to the same spot the Tuesday group is in?
We play on Discord.
Okay.
And luckily, it's happened on 3 different sessions, and at least one of the players from Group A was available when Group B rolled up on them.
Okay.
And then we had a really exciting thing happen back in August, and you can read all these session reports. They're on the blog, shadowOverSojenka.blogspot.com, but they are embargoed by 3 months to maintain operational security for the 2 groups. So
when you say embargoed, what do you mean by that?
Oh, so right now we're in October, but it's the July sessions are being posted.
Got it. So for Fog of War.
Important
absolutely. In these kind of campaigns, right?
Correct. It's vital. We also have downtime players.
There's Fog of War, but there's also the session reports. Like, I feel like the BroSR style, they don't really mention it as much as like the 1-to-1 time and the other stuff, but like the session reports are so choice. because all of the stuff you're experimenting with, all of the stuff you're learning, you can point to them and say, "All right, look, here's what went down." You know, these two guys came across each other. But I don't know if I've talked to anybody that purposefully puts that kind of a lag on it to where to maintain that fog of war. That's an interesting thing. I'm new to all this stuff, so maybe it's common, but like this is the first I'm hearing about it. So tell me more about that.
Well, not only do we have two groups of players, and let's call them session players at this point, because we
Okay.
also have downtime players that are playing non-session characters, or what is sometimes referred to as patron play.
Patron play,
So there are some
faction level play.
faction level play. There are a handful of other players who do not participate in the sessions who are participating in the campaign.
Hmm.
And so I'm calling them downtime players.
Perfect.
And in my most recent blog post, there's a little bit of a description on how I have that working, which I decided to go ahead and write before I published. It's kind of the first of the downtime player session reports, and I'm going to do one of them for each downtime session player or downtime player per month. But again, for Fog of War purposes, I'm also holding theirs back by 3 months as well.
Okay.
And so there's actually one coming out. It's actually a couple days late because I haven't been able to finish working on it. But there was a little bit of player versus player going on with one of the patrons versus one of the parties. So it's
I
pretty
love it.
And it was actually our first chainmail battle that we had in the campaign. And then just a couple weeks later, we actually had another of the downtime players / patrons did a sea battle.
Oh my gosh.
Using Don Featherstone and Tony Bath's ancient sea warfare rules.
So, okay, man, just that last little segment, like you raised so many questions, things that I feel like I could do like an episode with you on each of those. But that's because you are a wargamer, right? Like, did you come to wargaming first or to role playing first?
No, I came to D&D first back in the early 80s.
Okay.
My classmates, they had some of them had older brothers that were into D&D, and when they graduated from high school, they gifted all their old stuff to us. So we started with Holmes and a bunch of the old modules. This is back in like 82. And and so so I played role playing straight through middle school, high school, a little bit in college, and then after college, I met up with some old friends from high school again that had gotten into miniatures, and I basically fully switched over to miniature wargaming. Especially, I was living in Illinois at the time, and I moved to New Orleans. And when I got to New Orleans, I didn't find any RPG guys, but I did find a lot of miniatures.
Yeah.
And wargamers. So I literally played I stopped playing D&D or any other kind of RPG altogether, and I just did miniatures for 20 years.
So to me, the idea that you could start off with like a plucky band of adventurers going down and to get riches out of a dungeon, and that it could over time build up to commanding troops and having, like, to me, that is the simulation of the kind of stuff I was watching and reading, right? Like at the end of The Hobbit, it isn't the battle of the 5 dudes, right? It's the 5 armies. And I think that's probably why I'm so excited and interested in this style of play, is because that's on the table and that's possible for things to ramp up like that.
Right. Well, and one of the funny things is that when I was deep into miniature tabletop war games, we did a lot of Warhammer Fantasy Battle back when it was cool and a good game.
When you had Bretons?
What's that?
So when you had Bretons?
The Bretonians, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before it was Age of Sigmar, but anyway, they Games Workshop released a set of skirmish rules where you can make little war bands that consisted of like 20 figures, and so we kind of extrapolated that back, and it almost turned into a role playing game from there. We went from the full army down to the warband, and then we had some single guys, and we started doing dungeons because we had all played Dungeons and Dragons before as kids.
Yeah.
So it was fun, but it went, and it's fun to see how that progression, was recapitulates what happened, with the origins of the game to start with.
It's almost like the destiny is written, like it wants to happen, right?
Right.
And you've seen it in a few places. Like, have you played any? Like, have you heard of Risk Legacy?
Yes.
Yeah. So the designer of that game, he had played with his family a bunch of games of Clue, and in each successive, like 3 games in a row, Colonel Mustard was the culprit. And like that took on a life. It was like where nobody trusted Colonel Mustard anymore because they know. And like, so when you have that game to game thing, and I think a lot of us that have played, tabletop war games, there's always like one unit that like everyone got wiped out around him, and you're like, okay, this is Sergeant Grizzle, right? He's seen some stuff, and like your mind just naturally wants to go to that continuing story. So it is, like you say, it's very interesting how especially once you know it's possible, how the deep dive to a character going through those experiences just takes over. But for people who maybe all of their experience has only been like this, a New Hope style band where they have like, like Star Wars, like they've got the Jedi, the smuggler, the Wookiee, the princess, and like that's been the whole of their D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how does someone who, and I'm not trying to pick on 5e because there's a lot of people that really enjoy that system, but my experiences with 5e were pretty much laser focused on the one party, the mono party, and everything's about them. How do they get from that to the kind of game where you can be leading troops and have like these epic large scale warfare? Like, how does that, what's the sauce there? How does that work? How did it work for you the first time?
Well, the first time we got to that, I was actually playing in a ACKS Axe campaign in Dubzaron, and the wilderness was so dangerous that we had to hire. I believe I started with a magic user character, and I hired 2 troopers just to be my bodyguards, and then we went into the wilderness and got slaughtered. And so it was just so dangerous to go in the wilderness that we started hiring platoons of troops to guard us, so we could get to the dungeon because it was so dangerous traveling through the wilderness.
Interesting.
And so that evolved and went over time, and eventually, it resolved itself into there was a huge battle where the bad guys attacked the keep on the Borderlands, and it was spectacular. We had a really good time with that. We did that in a session.
I do want to answer Robert Morgan's question. Have we been pronouncing the name correct? Is it Sojenka?
Well, I'm stealing Croatian names for some of the ethnic groups in the campaign, and it probably should be Sojenka.
Okay,
but that sounds a little pretentious online. So
all right, I didn't mean to divert. You were about to drop some gold and talking about, or maybe you already had it, and my brain was just still processing it. The idea that it's not like some quest giver said to the young lad, "Go into these lands and tame them in the name of Aminar." No, it was just the rules made it so dangerous to travel overland that it was a natural leap for an elite player to say, well, if we want to do this, we got to get some dudes together.
Right. And then we went through the rules, and some of the players and their characters decided that they could be captains and lieutenants and what have you. So we didn't have to hire so many. And that way we had sergeants, we had platoons, we had heavy infantry, we had cavalry, and we built a little patrol force, basically about 60 to 80 strong, I believe, that we took everywhere we went because it was super dangerous to go out into the woods. And
If you're gonna get attacked
with
by a
your
displacer
with
beast,
your
you want him to be
comments,
able to eat 2 or 3 henchies first before it gets to you,
oh, displacer beasts are a piece of cake. It was the hydras that were in the woods.
right? Some dangerous woods in Dubzaron.
Yeah, well, although there was a hydra encounter, and I want to say most of us were 5th level, and it was charging us, and it was at a pretty decent range, and all of us had missile weapons, and we just demolished it with our missile
Just
weapons before it got
pincushioned
to
it.
us. That was pretty exciting.
So
Kind of anticlimactic. We destroyed this hydra while it was charging.
I bet you weren't too busted up about it that the story wasn't dramatic. Like everyone was
No,
high fiving and like we slaughtered that thing.
no. But then I had a 3rd level thief in the same campaign who took a mission from the mayor of the city where he was, because he'd gotten himself into some trouble, to take out an aquatic hydra, a 5-headed aquatic hydra, and he came up with a plan and he hired some dudes, and we got a net and we killed that thing. We dragged it out of the water and stabbed it to death with spears.
Nice.
That was exciting.
So to answer my question about how you get there,
It's organic, and you have to want to do it. I mean, if the conditions are there and the rules are there and they're not so confusing, you can get there. It helps a lot if you know how to war game.
yeah,
Because it's funny, I didn't even look at chainmail until a couple of years ago, maybe not even 2 years ago. But as soon as I did for the first time, I'd always heard about how confusing and incomplete that it was. But I sat down and looked at it, and I immediately understood what they were talking about because I had played for so long in so many other game systems.
yeah. And you
That
mentioned
they're
Bath and Featherstone.
descended from it. They're descended from chainmail more or less. So the concepts of charging and flank attacks and split moves and maneuvers and things like that. If you know what you're doing in terms of wargaming, then chainmail is not confusing or difficult at all.
Yeah. So there's part of it is the shared vocabulary of people that understand the assignment, right?
Right.
Part of it sounds like it's just inherent in the rule system. Like if you are playing a game where either that's an optional rule or it's not considered, it's much less likely that you're going to develop to that level unless you're either given some guidance or pushed by the DM, perhaps. Sounds like Blueholm though is doing it for you. Is that capacity in that game, or is that something that you
It's
said?
not. It's not
Okay.
in there at all. And part of what is making this campaign very challenging is I set it up for Tannisborg to be the centerpiece, and the idea was, hey, let's go explore this old-fashioned dungeon with old-fashioned rules or an old-fashioned style. Like we don't have a thief class. The thief class is not available, but people can do thief abilities. And I borrowed an idea from some other. The first place I saw it was on Bandit's Keep. I don't know if he originated it or not, but the proficiency, if you will, is based on turning undead chart.
Okay.
And so anybody can do those thiefy kind of things because they're not superhuman thiefy things. They're just extraordinary thiefy things.
Yeah.
And so you can try them. If you're going to pick a lock and you're on the 1st level and you're a 1st level character, you need to roll a 7. If you're on the 5th level, you need to roll a 12.
Okay.
That's kind of how that works, more or less. But that was the idea behind the campaign. And I thought, we'd get a couple groups and they would have fun, delving into the dungeon and dealing with the different factions down there, because there are some very exciting factions built into that dungeon. And it's very, very cool. And I'm actually doing a kind of a solo game playing those factions against each other.
So
in
I
the
had
midst of everything else that's going on. However, the guys decided that the dungeon is very dangerous. Also, there's a kind of a tax when you go in there and bring stuff out. You have to pay a fee. And so they're like, we can get more gold doing other things. And so the dungeon hasn't really got that much attention. And they've been going out looking at other areas of the campaign map. And by necessity, We've had to bring in. We started bringing in some ideas from AD&D, and that really wasn't sufficient. So we also needed to tack on an economic.
I need to, when you're done with that thought, I want to hear about what the Wyvern closet is.
the where was I going with this?
You were tacking on economics.
Oh, we just opened up the Axe book and grabbed a bunch of stuff out of there. So the whole economy is based on the rules from Axe. So thanks, Alex.
Yeah. All right. Now I'm sure I mispronounced that one as well. Wyvern. The Wyvern closet.
I say Wyvern.
All right.
I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
It's the American strain of
The American way.
Wyvern.
That's right. Yeah, there's a small room with many wyverns.
Sounds deadly.
It is. It actually wiped out one of the factions that had taken over or cleared out a large section of the dungeon. And when they got to that room, it was a TPK for them, which was all off screen. It was solo play on my part. So,
all right. So that was the war game part of the stuff you were talking about.
Correct. We got off topic there a little bit.
I'm so interested in all of it. I don't know if it's really off topic, but I really appreciate
you. You know what? While we're on the war game topic,
let's
pop over. I watched the Broriental patron chat.
Yes.
And I really enjoyed that. And they brought up war game quite a few times. And some of them were talking about they were playing it as a war game, and some of them were talking about they were doing player-facing content generation.
Yes.
And I'm not sure there's a distinction there, because playing it as a war game will automatically generate player-facing content.
It will. I guess what's the competition, though? Are you competing to drive each other off the map and the players are an afterthought? Or are you competing for the attention of the players because the in-game player sessions are your tool for achieving your ends, right? Like, in my mind, a player-facing patron.
What are your goals? What is your goal? What kind of faction do you have, and what are your goals? I mean, if you are running a fencing operation and you want the players to bring you all their loot, then you're going to work against rival thieves guilds.
Yeah.
And going to be drawing the attention of the players because you want to pay the best prices for the stuff they have.
Yeah.
Right. And you may not go to war with weapons against your enemies, but you may do economic war against them.
So do you have some examples of like your faction players or your patrons or however we want to call them doing stuff for their own ends that was just like generating hooks for you and handing them to you on a platter as a DM?
There are some, but I don't want to share them.
Okay, of course, yeah. We're this 3 guys, right? It's in the cooler for a bit
for operational security purposes.
Yeah.
I will say this: there is a blog post coming. What day? Today's Wednesday, so probably by Monday there should be a blog post up that describes a patron versus player party conflict. And
the game never stops.
I'm going to put as much into that as I can in terms of the downtime players planning and thought process and what they did in their communications. And a lot of it is I share the actual Discord chat. I just copy and paste the Discord chat right into the blog post. So I think it will be very valuable. And I'll throw in some commentary here and there between different spots to explain what's happening. But I think that will be, I don't know that I could do it justice without reading it out loud. So I think you'll have a better
Discord chat
for it.
Discord chat's also a good spot for like meme pictures and stuff for the blog.
Correct.
I don't know if you guys are like the ones I play with where they're like posting images of but I do notice help me if I mispronounce this. Trevor Noack says feed us. And it just struck me that the players never stop playing. He wants that information. I don't know if he's one of your players or not. I think so.
Is there a? Well,
He did.
no,
He
they
did
don't.
say he'll leapfrog.
The Tuesday players play every day,
Yeah,
and I do my best to respond to their activities. Um, Sometimes, they have to wait a couple days because I'm busy. But with the downtime players, I have set up a system where they choose a large scale activity for the month, and then we have a weekly check-in / course correction to see what happens.
yeah.
And that's what has made that manageable and pleasurable, as compared. So I have 5 or 6, or I have 5 right now, but I could definitely manage more because we're not doing things every single day.
All right, say that again. I feel like that is a piece that I've been searching for. I feel like the promise
Yeah,
of the patrons is
yeah,
that it makes your job fun and easy. And I feel like a lot of people's lived experience has been patrons make everything get crazy and burn me out. And
correct.
like
That is
even when I
absolutely
talked to
correct.
John Mollison, who was running Disembark, and it seemed super organized, he even said it got to be too much. So this is exactly the kind of nuggets I want to drop on this audience. So walk me through, how have you managed the amount
Okay.
of always on Discord available, DM, please help me with this kind of situation.
All right. Let's see here. Okay, that's not it. All right.
Because going all the way
Basically,
back,
there's
go ahead.
I've stolen the turn sequence from 2 different other games for how domain play and domain events occur. One of them is Low Fantasy Gaming by Stephen Gradzicki, and then the other, of course, is Axe. And so I have meshed those together to create a monthly and weekly turn sequence.
Okay.
The primary part of it is the outline of it is from Axe, and then some of the details are plugged in from Low Fantasy Gaming with regards to domain events and things like that.
What can I
Um,
accomplish in a month versus what I can do in a week?
you can set pretty a pretty ambitious goal for a month, and then what we'll do is see. I'll take a look at. Oh goodness, let's see. What is it? What is a thing? Say you want to explore. Okay. You're looking to quarry some pink sandstone to help build a new temple. And so it may take you a month to find the stone along the Serpentine Ridge, which is a huge sandstone ridge. So that month you'll spend prospecting for the stone. And so each week you'll have an encounter of some sort or not.
Mm.
It might be your troops that are out in the field looking, your actual prospectors have an encounter with a monster or with another band or with NPCs or with a party, or you may have to deal with the secretary to the governor or something along those lines. So it just depends. And
So if I'm the patron, I
yeah,
tell you we want sandstone for this temple,
right,
and you say that's going to take a month, and then
correct,
the ball's in your court. Week by week, you tell them, okay, while you're working on this, here's what happened.
correct.
All right. Um,
Yeah.
I
So
remember
let's
from
see.
Vomitron when he was my second episode, and he mentioned like if you respond immediately to these patron requests, you set the precedent that they expect you to always be available. So, like, do you do any of that kind of expectations management where you'll see the message, but you'll like give them a day or two just so they know, hey, I'm not at your beck and call? or are you trying to field all of them as they come?
Well, no. Sometimes I'll see them come up as a notification, but I can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I might, maybe I'm driving or maybe I'm at work or what have you. Can you see my screen?
I'm still seeing the map. Let me remove it, and then you might need to swap out what you're sharing.
Okay, do I have to hit present again?
I think
or
so.
Stop screen?
Yeah, stop screen sharing, and then you should be able to share something else. While you're looking that up, I just want to chuck this up here. What is that bronze statue that you've used for your icon on Twitter? Is that like some kind of frog creature?
It is a frog creature. It is it's one of the elder gods. Hold on. His name, where is it? I want to make sure. His name is Zorag Tun.
Okay.
And he's one of the elder gods who dwells in the Endless Necropolis.
Is that part of the Tannisborg setting?
Nope, that's part of Sajenka. It actually was randomly rolled.
Okay. I love it. Okay.
Select a tab to share. Oh, I can't share my Discord. Okay, hold on. Let's do it this way.
I might be able to if you want to, like.
Well, no, actually, I think here's a better way because I want to keep some stuff. Again, I want to maintain some operational security here. Okay, I'm going to crop this.
Trevor Nowak is a player in your game, by the way.
There we go.
Fin Fan.
Okay. I don't know everybody's other handles. There's a lot of alternate IDs out there.
You're one to talk, bro.
I'm not making fun. I'm not mad. It's okay. It's okay.
Right on. Let me just go through. Here's one Twitter handle and the YouTube channel that goes with that one. Here's the other one, War Game Culture, and the YouTube that goes with that one. And then you got a Substack, and then you got a Blogspot. I'm not mad at you. I think it's awesome. And it seems like all those accounts are doing pretty well. So you're producing value in all those layers.
Well, I try, but also, not everyone's interested in the wargaming stuff, and not everyone is interested in the RPG stuff. All right, I'm going to open a picture. So let's see if we can share this, because this is the turn that I stole and modified from ACKS.
Are you excited for the Kickstarter?
I am. Select a tab to share.
I hope my wife doesn't find out how much money I'm planning to spend on that. Alrighty.
That's the old conundrum, isn't it?
Oh, it just disappeared.
Okay, can you see my other screen or no? Let me do my OBS. Hold on.
All right. Yeah, it showed up in the bottom, and then I tried to add it.
How do I change my camera? Hold on, here we go. There we go.
Okay.
Can you see me? Okay, so this is the monthly turn. A faction or domain turn occurs over the course of a month of calendar days. Barring unusual events, the faction or domain morale is adjusted every quarter. The domain growth phase occurs automatically for player characters of the appropriate level as listed in the character class description. Wilderness domains do not automatically draw families to settle. Factions will grow by recruiting new members and/or promoting hirelings to member status if applicable. The congregant growth phase is only applicable to PCs or NPCs that have built and staffed a religious structure. That is a piece of the pie that has not really been fully developed yet. But
Yeah.
no one has asked about it or has wanted to, really dig into it. So it's lying fallow. The revenue collection phase must be performed by the master of the domain or an officer of the court called the bailiff. In larger domains, the bailiff will have deputies to assist in collection. For factions involved in mercantile or trade ventures, the revenue is collected as rent, trade goods exchanged, etc. Campaign activities include a wide range of actions. These include adjusting garrison levels, patrol frequency, trade issues, domain infrastructure, issuing decrees, and so on. Bronstein patrons. This is 6 months old. It doesn't reflect my new terminology.
Okay.
They engage in or have faction members engage in the various downtime hijinks or other time-consuming activities such as making scrolls or potions, etc. These activities may influence faction and domain morale. And then there's a little chart. Number 1 is growth, faction growth. Number 2 is congregant growth. Number 3 is revenue collection. Number 4 is activities. 4A is random events, which I try to get out in the first week of each month.
Is this for you or is this for the patrons?
This is for the patrons, and they are empowered to play these for themselves because they know what their rules are for their group, and so they can figure out what their revenue is, how much their faction might grow, what their expenses are, etc. And then what the things that I do is I create a random event for each faction at the beginning of each month that they can act on or not, depending on what it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4 are all resolutions regarding whatever action they want to take.
Okay. And this looks super valuable. Like I'm thinking about my experiences in Brew-Oriental Adventures, and I came in as a patron, and I mean it's pretty well known that I had no internet. I didn't know the system. I didn't know the setting. I was a poor choice for a patron, but I feel like if I had been handed something like this, it would have definitely helped me. It would have helped me know what was expected of me, and I would not have bombarded Ryan with as much stuff as I did. I don't feel like I was the worst for that, but
well, and the other important thing is to set up your Discord so that you have, each downtime player should have their own private channel where they can talk to you as the dungeon master. There should be a patron channel where patrons can talk to each other behind the scenes or in public or whatever they want.
Yeah.
Now, if 2 patrons decide that they want to chat together, I've had sometimes they ask me, hey, I want to talk to this patron or I want to talk to that guy. And so I can set up a channel for them, or they just chat in a Twitter chat, or they do stuff behind my back, which is fine too. And then they let me know what they have got planned.
And Huvo says, "Don't worry, Dunder. I first started learning AD&D by jumping in as a patron." Talk about jumping into the deep end on AD&D.
But again, so each player in the campaign also has their own.
Mm-hmm.
And then for the campaign, each of the different settlements, because there are like 7 different towns on the regional map, each one has a gossip channel.
Okay.
So every week, or according to whatever's happening, so say the patrons are doing some different things, if they're doing something publicly and it's going to be common knowledge, I'll post it in the gossip channel for that community.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone can see it. If they don't pay attention, they don't pay attention. That's fine too. But frequently I've seen them throw out hooks that have gotten picked up, and I've seen them throw out hooks that haven't.
Okay, well that gets into Black Lodge Games question, and I don't know if you can with the 3-month moratorium, but the question is, can you describe some of the faction play actions that have influenced the direction of the adventurers? And maybe don't go into specifics if it's hidden, but like how has the presence of those guys impacted the table session experience for your players?
Well, there was an enormous impact that happened in July, which will be coming up on the blog this week. And that was when one of the downtime player factions attacked their nascent stronghold and happened to basically kill almost all the guards that were on the surface. Now, luckily for them, what they're doing is they've found a dungeon and they're turning that dungeon into their stronghold. So the guys that were on top got attacked, and a lot of them died. And so just yesterday, they went on a kind of a mission of retribution.
Okay.
And that turned out to be rather interesting as well. So yeah, I mean, definitely have a massive impact on what's going on. There's also there's another downtime player who is running a character down in Tanaspor Dungeon.
Okay.
That is.
So it's not completely abandoned by the players.
No, it's not completely abandoned. And then there's another faction. How do I put this? I don't want to give it away because it's important. There's another faction that is being run by someone outside the campaign. And they're playing a super, super long game. I don't even know if I don't know if anyone will ever find out what they're doing, because I don't know if the campaign will last that long. It's basically on like a 2-year time frame, like 2 real years for this to all play out. So if the campaign lasts that long, we might find out. So
I wonder how many
27 months from now you'll start to see what's happening.
27 months. I wonder how many lessons from this style of play we will never know, because they just it's not ever okay to share them without wrecking something, or it just kind of gets forgotten after 27 months, Follow-up question from Black Lodge Games. They ask, do you anticipate Acts 2 solving some of the mechanical gaps that you are filling in by combining elements from different games? Can this be done with a single system? How much weight does the low fantasy gaming piece of it bear?
The low fantasy gaming portion is basically a random table.
Oh, okay. So X2 already does that.
Right. But I'm using this particular where is it? It's in the compendium. The Low Fantasy Gaming Compendium has the domain rules for low fantasy gaming, and it has a very interesting table of random events that can happen to your domain in the course of a month.
Okay.
And so I like that table. I'm just using it. And so, I mean, it could be something from XYZ on, drive through RPG it, or, there's any number of random event tables that you can use. I think one of the things that I am looking for is their economics is becoming a much more important part of this game. And so the economics rules from Axe, because they're so robust, are necessary, because there are basically none in Blueholme. And that has really become an object of contention.
Interesting. All right, let's take a pause on the topic, and let me just ask, if people want to get them some more of this purple druid action, how can the viewers support you? What are you doing right now? And now's the time to
they can stand up and cheer. I mean, you can go to Shadow over Serjenka blog and read it and ask questions. The comments are open. If you have comments about things, if you want to know more, if you see a session report that has something that I maybe glossed over that really grabs your interest, leave a comment, ask a question. I promise you I will answer it. The Memoriam Substack is free. That's where I publish some of the role-playing game stuff. You can sign up for that. It
Is it
is
that one?
very irregularly published. It's Stephen Smith, .substack.com. You can go there. It's very irregular. I don't know when I'm going to post things. That being said, I also have ideas for things that I talk about sometimes that don't ever get published. So if there's something you've heard me say something about, let me know, and I'll see if I can't work on it. One of the things I did start doing was I was doing a side by side of Blue Home, the Home 77, and the new one that's supposed to be coming out, Adventure RPG, which says that it's an expansion of Homes, but it's really a Holmes skinned BX product.
Hmm. Man, BX is very well represented
Yes.
in
Yes.
in the products that are out there today.
Well, the thing I like best about Holmes is that it puts magic crafting right there at the beginning of the game. First level magic users are able to make scrolls. First level clerics are able to make potions.
Wow. Yeah.
And they only cost 100 gold pieces per level. And one of the things that I thought was very interesting with the Adventure RPG that is, I guess, going to be published soon, he changed the price to 1,000 gold pieces per level. And I think that takes something away from the game, because in conjunction with 1-1 downtime pacing, being able to make a scroll in a week as a first level magic user and doing troop play and
Yeah.
party shares resources, then you can have a magic user go on an adventure and then come home and grab some of that gold and use it to create scrolls for 2 or 3 weeks. And then the party can go off and do other things for those 2 or 3 weeks. And then on week 4, that magic user can come forward. He's first level. He's got 4 spells. 3 are on scrolls ready to go.
Yeah, he can punch above his weight.
He can punch way above his weight, and the party will have done some exploration and found out what is the ripest peach to be plucked that we need that kind of magical power to go after.
Do you think it's an arbitrage issue? Like, if you spend 100 gold creating a scroll, can you sell it for 1,000?
Maybe if the market will support that. It
Yeah.
depends. Not in the Shoyenka economy, because there are 3 magical academies that have different lists of spells. Some of them are in common, some of them are not, and they guard them very jealously. So theoretically, yes, you could sell a scroll for much more. But I also don't allow magic users to copy a scroll spell into a spell book. They're a different thing.
Oh, okay. So since we've brought up Bro Oriental Adventures and wargaming, it's worth pointing out you started off trying to help out with that endeavor. Yes.
Yes, I did.
Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, I thought it was a really cool idea, and it rapidly got out of hand. And unfortunately, I don't know that really anyone could have taken on something like that. The way that it went, making, just an open cattle call, just open the doors and let anybody in.
Yeah.
I think if he had started with a party and said, okay, I'm looking for 5 patrons, and then, a month later, take 5 more, and then 2 months later, take 5 more, or so on. But bringing all those people in at once was truly a logistical nightmare that I don't think anyone could have managed.
How do you vet your patrons?
Just via their Twitter or from recommendations from other people.
Okay.
I'm involved in a whole bunch of Discords about different topics. And so a lot of my patrons are from those Discords. So I've been speaking to them for a year or more.
All right. So I've been invited to many since I started this YouTube channel. and it seems like most of them, when I show up, Brigadine's already there. Like that dude is so well connected.
He is all over the place. Yeah.
He is. So, but you do have a process where you don't just open the floodgates willy nilly. You make sure you know a little bit about the person that they could handle it.
Correct. And also that they want to play that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Have you gotten any noobs though that you had to scale up, like expectations management?
I've had some people that have asked to come in and decided that the time commitment was going to be too great.
Hmm.
Based on what they've seen in terms of the traffic on the Discord, there's a lot of stuff there. Yeah.
Have you ever had to like tell a patron, hey, we gave it a good shot. This isn't working out. Maybe you should take on a player character.
No, I haven't asked anyone to go.
Okay.
And then interest waxes and wanes too. I mean, sometimes people are busy. People have their lives. Some
That's
people,
Christian. Yeah.
they get really involved for a while and then they back off for a while because they're moving or their job, is seasonal or whatever. But you know what? That's kind of how life is, and I think that adds some verisimilitude to what's going on because sometimes the downtime players are heavily involved and they're stirring the pot.
Yeah.
Things come to a boil, and then other times, they back off. And the cool part is I have a lot of notes on all these things, so eventually I can publish a lot of this stuff on the blog so that I think people will be able to learn a lot from it.
Rock on. Is there a person or an event that you would say had the most impact on the way that you play the game?
On the way that I play the game?
And it could be a positive or a negative.
I don't know that there is a single person. I think that getting involved with this rowdy bunch that calls themselves the Brossard and really looking into these things. I mean,
he said the name. He said it.
2 years ago, I went, and you can look it up on Twitter. I went around and around and around with Jeffro on how one time would not work. It was stupid. It was the dumbest thing. And
I swear that guy makes friends by starting off as enemies. I don't get it.
Well, we weren't enemies. I mean, I didn't hate the guy. I just couldn't understand.
Some people do that.
But part of why I didn't understand is because at the time I was in a game that played once a week for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And I couldn't see how we could go out, do an adventure, and get back in those 2 hours. And I may catch some flack for this, but when we started the DesertSwamp campaign, I was there almost at the very beginning. Wow. And we were doing 2 hours and 15-minute sessions, and it was a race. We had to leave town, get to the dungeon or get to where we were going, explore for a bit, and then get back. And it sort of wasn't fun because it was so fast-paced.
There's not a whole lot of room for some of the other pillars, right? Like I'm pretty sure you guys weren't doing any role play. Not in the sense of like silly voices role play, right?
Right. And so as the group membership changed, the ability of the session to last longer grew. And so eventually, after several months, we were playing for 4 hours, and that meant we could do a lot. So getting back to town was not a problem, or getting to the next town, because we would get together as players in between sessions and plan out our move. We're going to go from town A, we're going to go hit this forest lair over here, and then we're going to continue on to town B, and then next week we'll play the characters that are in training in town C. And so we used to think 2 and 3 sessions ahead, which was a lot of fun, and gave me an idea for setting up a venturer network, but I never was able to get that put together. But that's a story for another time.
Where do you see
it happen in my campaign? My Tuesday guys are going to set that up starting like yesterday.
Do you do 4 hours on Tuesday and 4 hours on Thursday?
Yes. Sometimes 4.5. It depends.
Okay. And how much, for someone who's never tried it, how much time and effort does layering in the domain game add to you as a DM? Like if they're like, man, I am in that spot where I'm just
Layering
meeting
in
once a week with my buddies, or maybe once every other week. I am excited and interested in this stuff you guys are talking about. I want to try it, but like what is the cost that you may have to count as a DM if you're like, all right, I'm gonna invite a couple patrons on and flip on this one-to-one time. Like how much does that
I
take?
would plan on 30 minutes a week for each patron.
Okay.
If you are really strict with the rules and saying, okay, what do you want to do? What's your October activity? And then you set an appointment with these guys. I need to know what your weekly checkup is by Monday or by Tuesday or whatever. And then I promise I'll get back to you within 12 hours. Or something along those lines. If you really want to do it and you're pressed for time, you have to be strict with how you spend your time.
Yeah.
I'm kind of lucky because I don't have a full-time job, so I have more time for this. And as people are wont to say about prep, it's like crochet. I enjoy the prep. I like doing it. So I like making the maps. I like making encounter tables. I do want to show you one more thing when it comes to prep.
Okay. Yeah, we can go back there.
Where is my... Nope, that's the wrong one. All right. So this is the regional map. This is what I started with. Now, each of these are 5-mile hexes. And the dots are settlements. There's forest, there's marsh, there's hills, there's mountains over here. I literally have every possible terrain that people can go adventure in.
Do you have a marsh next to a desert?
No, I do not. I have marsh next to hills.
Okay,
I have a salt marsh that's on the shore. Now, what I did my second step was I made a copy of that map, and I cut it up into segments. So this is a piece of that map west of the Serpentine, and I have a description of the terrain over there, and a little thumbnail sketch of what it is. And this says, if you can't read that, it says dry scrub, higher hills of Dravanek, inhabited by humans and dwarves. Shepherds keep great herds of goats. Resources include sandalwood and gold in the hill country.
Cool.
And then on the facing page, there is an encounter table. It's a D6 plus D8 encounter table. The 2 is always a big bad guy. And the 14 may or may not be bad. 7, 8, and 9 are the most common, so that's where you're going to get your shepherds, your prospectors, your ore wagons, things like that. And then, the various things. What I do is I use a resource called Filling in the Blanks that creates features for these various hexes. And
that's on drive-thru?
That's on drive-thru. Yep, it's worth its weight in gold. If you can get the print copy, get it. Otherwise, get the PDF and print it out. It's full of amazing and very useful tables. But basically, what I do is I just take my terrain tables and I roll up these monsters these encounters, and that's for the region. And then after that, and this is going to look crazy, but I have time to do this. Not everyone does. I have a page for each 5-mile hex.
Nice.
And each of these sub-hexes is 1 mile. And so this is one of those hexes from that regional map. It's just above the marsh. So you can see the marsh there at the bottom. There's some hills here. There's an encounter table that I will build from the regional table, but it will also include any layers that have been created within this hex. And then on the right-hand side, you have a line for each of the sub-hexes where I can put in the terrain type, what kind of layer, is there a feature, is there a resource, or what have you.
And the
So there's
layer, is that coming from your filling in the blanks book, or is that coming from another source?
no, that comes from Blueholm, um,
Okay.
or whatever rules you're using to generate
So like if you've got a
encounters.
creature from the monster manual and it says, percent chance in lair, when you
Exactly.
fill that creature in on the encounter table, are you just rolling that percent at that moment? And then if it hits, then you're like, okay, this is a layer in this hex. Is that how you
Right.
do it?
Or say for instance, I want to put a minotaur in that
Mhm.
in those hills. And so he lives in a cave in the hills, and it's a windy labyrinthine cave, and I just want him there. So
Yeah.
I'll put down that there is a minotaur lair in hex 0605, and you know he is able. You might encounter him as a wandering monster anywhere in this hex, this
Yeah.
5 mile hex. But you can also find his lair, and there's a percent chance he may be there. There's a percent chance he may not. Um, so
So this level of prep makes it so that on game night they can go anywhere you want and you can roll with it.
right now, don't get me wrong. There's 130, I think, hexes on that regional map. I do not have them all mapped out
Hmm.
to this level of detail. I mean, you can even see this one doesn't have an encounter table. So if they go to this hex all of a sudden out of nowhere, I would use the regional encounter table
Yeah.
because that one's made, that one's ready. Um, but if and then I would use another encounter table if there was something more specific. So if they were really spending a lot of time in the hills, then I would flip to the hills table and roll on that.
Right on.
But theoretically, yes, over time, my campaign prep will allow me to have one of these sheets for all 130 hexes on the regional map. And so theoretically, they could go from hex to hex to hex,
Hmm.
just flip from page to page to page and know exactly the features, the resources, the layers, the encounter table. Do they, at what point of the day do they encounter a random monster? Well, they happen to be in this hex, and so I'll roll on this encounter table. Or if it's 2 hours later and they're in the next hex, I can roll on that hex's encounter table. But yeah, so when you have a decent amount of campaign prep done, then session prep is much reduced.
Yeah. Thanks for it, man. I feel like we're dropping some heavy secrets here on how the sausage gets made. This is exactly what I was hoping would come out of this because, as I said, I'm Johnny Come Lately. I'm trying to find it on Twitter. There was it was something I reposted. Somebody mentioned um, that the one-to-one paced games are the only ones that they think about when they're not at work. Let me see if I can share my screen. Um, Share screen. There's the message. Let's go to Twitter here, and then I will chunk it up there. All right. I don't know if you guys can see that or not. Let me zoom in on it. But Czar Bombadil, uh, friend of the show, posted one-to-one time it just works on top of old school. So it was a quote tweet of old school saying, people are quick to dismiss one-to-one time, but I'm playing in a lot of games right now, and the one-to-one games are the only ones I think about at all when I'm not at the table. And so I said, you don't have to play one-to-one time, but if you do, they'll be thinking about your game on the drive to work. And the thing that strikes me about this style of gaming is, it's kind of like what's good about Gene Wolfe. Have you ever read Gene Wolfe?
I am not a fan of the Black Company.
Oh no. I don't. Did he write that? He wrote the Book of the New Sun.
I haven't read that one.
Okay. Um, he is a dense writer. He's science fiction, fantasy, but he's famous for like unreliable narrators. And I have found that when I read one of his books, Like there will be things that occur to me in the shower thoughts, and I'll realize something connects to something else, and I will have to like run and pull the book out and see if I'm right. And like to me, he writes on such another level because it's not just what's on the page, but he's playing with what you paid attention to and what you understood and what you remembered. And he says literature is when you can read something for the second time and enjoy it more than you did the first.
Yeah, no, and I'm
And
sorry, that's Glenn Cook who wrote The Black Company.
oh, okay, all right, gotcha. Um, for me, for me, this kind of gaming, like the other style I've played, and maybe this is just me. I'm not trying to diss the way that anybody plays this game. If they're having fun, rock on. But it's exactly right. This style of play is the kind of thing that can sustain interest and attention even when you're not at the table. And it is the kind of thing that you can delight your hex maps and creating those pages where you're like, okay, for this region, here's what's going on there, and even you just get excited. You're like, I can't wait for my players to blunder into this and see if they come up. If they roll the dice and it comes up Minotaur, then all bets are off, right?
Right. Right. Well, another fun thing, I mean, one of the things that I enjoy about it is that, for instance, if one of the players wants to have his character do some research in the Academy library about vampires, and
Yeah.
we roll and say, okay, it's going to take you 3 days. All right. And we talked about this on Monday. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is when I'll post his information
Nice.
because I'll just wait for those 3 days. And so it builds drama, I think. It gives me time to figure out what it is exactly that they're learning, but also, keeping it real. And so maybe 50,000 hexes. Nice. What size hexes though? This map has 1,000,000 1 yard hexes.
There you go.
Um, the so if they're doing research, it takes 3 days and it's going to carry them past the session.
Hmm.
I definitely don't want to give them that information
And you've got that
prior to
anticipation
that.
built in.
So, say for instance, they tell me on Monday they want to research vampires, and we decide it's going to take 3 days. I don't want to give them the monster manual, clip with vampire information on Monday so that everybody else has it on Tuesday. Because
Yeah.
I've reskinned and reworked vampires for this campaign to make them a little more exciting.
Okay.
And so the lore is a little different from the traditional lore. And so they did some research on it because they think they've encountered a vampire. And I gave them a ton of information about it. But they had to wait until the time that their research was going to take was over. And the person doing the research wasn't able to communicate that information to the party until after their session. So rather than dive headlong into where this vampire may or may not be, they stayed clear until they had the proper information. And then when they had what they believed to be the proper information, they went and loaded for bear.
UFO says, also I use a reminder app on Discord to set up resolutions in advance. I like that. So there was another game I played that was just a text-based game. I think it was called Lifeline. And it was a game it acted like you were texting with an astronaut that had crashed on another planet. And they would just give you these little updates. And then at different points, they'd ask you questions. Like they were like, it's getting cold here. And I don't know if I should stay in the cockpit or if I should go down to where the engine was because it's leaking and it's warm from the radiation. But I don't know, my suit tells me it's this much radiation. Tell me, should I stay in the cockpit or should I try to sleep by the engine? And then you would text back and tell them what you wanted them to do. And but and I was playing it at work, so like my phone would buzz and I'd see all this poor guy's dealing with this thing, and then I just go on Wikipedia and be like, how much radiation can a human withstand? Like that kind of thing, that where you have a decision and then you're committed and you're just waiting for the information, and it's going to impact what happens on Tuesday or Thursday. Like that anticipation, I don't know how you get that without this one-to-one, without this fog of war, like the mystery and the waiting and the suspense.
Right. Well, and the other cool thing about it is that the players can turn that around on me as well. Because like Belloc says here, Tuesday doesn't go in loaded for bear. They planned out an extensive and highly intricate plan to attack a goblin lair last night, and they did not clue me in at all. So I went into this session completely cold. I didn't know what they were going to do. I knew, I had a map of the area. I knew that there was a goblin lair there.
Yeah.
They had explored it previously. So I had drawn this map up. Again, I colored it because I like to do this. But they're like, okay, we're going to hit this. We're going to hit this lair. We got cavalry. We got this. We got that. We got the other thing. And I had to make it happen. And I think, but they had a goal in mind, and they didn't want to share that goal with me because they wanted to maintain their security, their operational security. And I think that was a smart thing to do. And so
all right. Well, so, but that does bring in a prep question though, right? Like I think
right.
one of the things that zero prep supremacists would say is that, preppers always complain that they had something planned in advance because they thought that's what the players were going to do, and then the players just showed up like they were going to a restaurant and opened the menu and said, oh, let's do this tonight. Or in your case, where they had a plan, they were working together and they didn't want you to know what it was. How can a prep supremacist counter the randomness of the whims and vicissitudes of the players' plans?
It just takes patience. It just takes patience because eventually they'll get to everywhere. This particular goblin tribe, I actually created their table of organization and equipment 3 or 3.5 months ago.
Oh, okay.
Because they were involved in another situation, and so I needed to know what they had in terms of resources. And so I knew that, and I knew that they had a cave system. So I grabbed a map from online and I just tucked that into a folder. And so I knew how many warriors they had. I knew how many were armed with this, how many were armed with that. They had traps laid out. I threw some traps onto this map, and I've kept it in the folder for 3 months. Maybe they never go there. I don't know, but they did.
But you were prepared when they did.
And I was prepared when they did. So I was able to describe to them what they were encountering. Now, the funny thing was, it wasn't a rat tunnel warren of tiny little caves. It was a big cavern complex.
Okay.
So that played to the advantage of the players who brought a slew of men-at-arms with them. And so I don't want to describe it as a cakewalk, but it wasn't the nightmare that it could have been.
Nice. Now, Trevor Nowak says, patrons change the stakes on this. Any level of prep can clue in our opponents.
Correct. That is correct. And so, for example, that's why the session reports are embargoed for 3 months, so that they don't. It was a muffin walk.
That's a good one.
I kept trying. I was racking my brain trying to think of ways to make it more challenging, and it was like every time I turned around, it was like, "Oh, all right, we'll fill that guy with arrows. We'll fill that guy with arrows." So no, it was fun because it was challenging just to put it all together on the spur of the moment.
Did they get a lot of treasure?
Not as much as they could have if they'd done it a month ago.
Burn. That's what you get for being timid.
Well, part of it is that, and part of it is because there were some other things going on with another faction within the Serpentine that I rolled a random event on, and so there was a skirmish last month with these guys. So, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things going on that just happening on the timeline, and and they come from random tables. Again, I don't prep these things. I don't plot them out in advance. I roll on a random table.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, okay, this faction fights with that faction. Why? I don't know. Let's figure that out. And then who wins? On my YouTube channel, I just did a battle. I did a chainmail battle between two NPC factions, neither of which is being run by a patron, because I wanted to find out who actually survived and see what happened. And I made a video of it. It's kind of fun. I was having some technical problems with my stupid phone though, so it could have been a better video. So don't go watch it.
That's so that was a little solo wargaming on your part, just taking two NPCs head to head with each other.
Right. Yeah, it was a battle. It was about 300 men on each side, which worked out to about I used cubes, wooden cubes, okay. So there's about 30 wooden cubes involved.
Shock Top says prep wide enough and you get over the fear of players missing things.
Right.
It's almost like a mega dungeon where you just have to let go of the thought that they're going to get into every room. Right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Figure out the story. It's like, no, this is just a place for them to go and try and pull their shenanigans.
Yeah. Like at the beginning when I first started laying this out, I wrote some notes about the mountains there in the north, the northeast. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like a really cool idea, but I haven't done anything to develop it since I had the idea back in April. Again, this is just a note that's on its page in the binder. And if someone decides to go there, then, I'll develop it when it becomes necessary. And if they decide to teleport there, I have at least a basic knowledge of what is going on.
What's easier to run, Tannisborg or the stuff that you've made here?
It's easier to run your own stuff because you know exactly everything there. You don't have to go and learn someone else's plans and ideas.
Yeah. I feel like it's like the difference between presenting your own slides versus someone's like, hey, can you do my presentation? I can't make it.
That's exactly what it is.
So the mental load, because I feel like a lot of people that say, well, if I want to do no prep, the easiest is just to buy a module and run that.
Now, see, I think that's the hardest. That's the hardest to do because then you have to learn the module.
Yeah. You got to read it all the way through a couple times so that you know why, because the module may tell you what, but it doesn't always explain the interrelationships between stuff and why things are the way they are.
Right.
And you got to,
which again is one of my beefs with the idea of rolling terrain live at the table. Because if you look at this map, okay, a weakness of this map is there's 1,000-foot tall ridge on the western edge of the map, and there are 7,000-foot mountains on the right edge of the map. You can see those mountains for about 50 miles.
Yeah.
So there's no way, there's really nowhere you can go on this map. You can't see those mountains. And the 1,000-foot tall,
maybe they're misty.
I believe you can see for 17 miles, if I recall correctly. I have it written down somewhere. So as long as you're within 10 or 15 miles of that ridge, you can see it. You can't miss it. You can't get lost.
Yeah.
So
barring some unfortunate weather, right? Like if they were misty mountains.
Weather, but you've grown up there. You know that it's over there.
They're not going to be misty every day.
So if you're just generating terrain randomly and they're in the plains and then all of a sudden there's a hill and then a mountain, look, I should have been able to see this for the last 2 days or 3 days or 4 days,
Yeah.
We don't want to go to the mountains. Mountains are dangerous. We want to go to the shore.
I remember playing a video game. It was the Aliens Colonial Marines. And we were so excited for the game because we love that movie. And then there was a scene when we realized where the developers ran out of money. And we loaded in this thing and we walked in and stuff was just like popping into reality in front of us. And that's kind of what you're talking about. If you do just totally no prep it and roll it at the table, you can get some of those render issues with something that you should be able to see way off.
Right. And I mean, you still have, even though you have prepped your campaign and you have a campaign map, if your players are traveling across the map, you still get to roll random encounters. You still get to roll for random weather. There's still exciting things that happen for both the game master and the players. And
you don't get the
you're able to maintain, and you have that legacy style where if other characters went there first and then died, you know what's there. And you know that those dead characters' loot is to be found out there. And so when the next batch of characters travel that same route, you already know how to describe it.
Yeah. And you rob yourself of the delicious anticipation of knowing that there is a minotaur in the hills and wondering if they're going to run afoul of it or not.
Right, exactly.
You would just don't get that thrill if you find out about the minotaur when they do.
Yeah. And you know what? Maybe there's a thing to the zero prep concept that maybe people just don't like creating stuff. I enjoy sitting down and drawing maps and coming up with stories and ideas, and I just jot these notes down. I have 2 pages of notes about a feature on this map that I don't know if anyone will ever go there, but that's okay.
It's like the Gene Wolfe story. It is just fun thinking about this stuff just in and of itself.
Right.
You're in the shopping. You're in the line at the grocery store, and you're just cracking up thinking about what happens when they discover this little thing you've planned.
Yeah, exactly. And and again, like what Mr. Wargame is doing, when you sit down to prep out your campaign area,
there he is.
Doing is, what you're doing is teaching yourself how to manage and master these tools.
Belloc says players need information to make good decisions. Good DM prep makes good player prep possible. And that was one of the more salient arguments against zero prep supremacy that I heard was there are certain things that leave evidence of themselves around. Like if there was a valuable wardrobe and the goblins dragged it down the hall from one room to the other, if you have prepped that, then the players can discover scratch marks in the floor.
Right? Exactly. It's like the mountains. It's just like the mountains.
Alchemic Raker says, zero prep for me is about the lack of time to dedicate to session and campaign prep, but still being able to run a game with little notice anyway. I can see that's where I want to get. I love the stuff that John Mollison is doing with his solo play. I want to learn the system well enough that either way, if they go somewhere that I'm prepped for, or if they do something like I've got a module. Where is it? It's around here somewhere. It's called Puzzle Dungeon, and spoiler alert: you put your earmuffs on if you don't want me ruin part of that. But there is a lens that you can get in magical tapestries, and if they put the tapestry up in the correct room and point the lens at it and look into it, it teleports them to the land of the tapestry. And I had players do that. I want to be able to roll with that, where if I've got my whole hex map and I'm like, they're on this plane, and then they do something that shifts them to another plane, I want to be good enough at the system that I can roll with it and they don't even notice a thing, right? So I really like the solo play for getting and like the ability to do that. But that's a different thing than saying this is always the best way to play, is to not have anything planned and just to be just as surprised as the players. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Right, but those are 2 different things.
Yes.
Because a big part of why old school gaming is so different from new school style gaming is because a lot of the old school gamers and older gamers have read a lot of the older fiction that's just not available anymore. And so they have a different point of view on what the game is supposed to be or what the milieu is supposed to be. And frankly, if you have read 50 fantasy novels by 30 different authors, you are in a much better position to do zero prep gaming than someone who's only read Harry Potter.
Yeah. Or as Jeffro would say, don't read anything after 1980.
Right. Well, yeah, that's a good paraphrase.
Alchemic Raker also says a random table which includes scratch marks and hooting noises can create those signs anyway. The referee then makes the call for verisimilitude. There's an expensive furniture here that locals move. Okay. I can see, because I've actually experienced that. I was playing in Trellopolis. It was my very first time playing in this style of gaming. I had a gnome, and I said before we went down a level in the dungeon, I was like, well, I want to listen and see what I can hear. And Jeffro just rolled on the random noises table in the back of the DMG and came up with hooting. So he tried to make some hooting noises, which was hilarious. And I think he was trying to do like a chimpanzee or something, but we all thought it was an owl. And he mentioned it was a burrow owl. And on my gnome, his foam the gnome had a sheet, and it said that he could speak with burrowing animals. So like that's an example of I said I listened. He's like, oh crap, I need a sound. He rolled. He got hooting, and like that became a force multiplier for the gnome when he rescued an 8-foot tall burrow owl. So I see your point, Alchema Raker. It can work both ways. And there is a delight in discovery. I don't know if it offsets the lost days of anticipation that you would have by planting one. And Alexander McCrease in the last episode talked about how like some things he puts there so that when the random stuff comes, his mind can hook onto it and say, oh, these are the pigs that get hunted by the orc tribe that I already know is there. Like some of the pigs have saddles on them, stuff like that.
Right. I think there needs to be a mix. And I think that Alchemic Raker is exactly right. A random table which includes scratch marks and hooting noises. That is going to require some experience, though, and some imagination on the part of the game master to create a random table like that. And so
how
comfortable if you don't have that experience, if you don't have that experience and you don't have that kind of knowledge, then if you're strictly relying on whatever tables might be in the book, your ability to weave things together will be limited. And I think that there is a place, especially for newer game masters, there is a place for being careful about doing an appropriate amount of campaign prep in order to lessen the difficulty of running into unprepared materials in a session.
Have you ever heard a middle school jazz band?
Have I ever heard one?
Yes.
Yeah, they're terrible.
Yeah. So but they still give them a chance to riff, right? They're like, okay, now's your solo. Get up there with your saxophone.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Do whatever you want, and like they improv, and it just is not good. And everyone still claps because it's his son out there, and you want to support him and stuff. But yeah. So for a beginner game master, one such as myself in playing this style, probably not good to just jump into the deep end with no prep, because I'll be just up there squeaking and honking. Right? But someone who's put the reps in, someone who can lift the bar, they can get out there and just wail. And because they've got the skill, I want to get to the point where I can do either. But I do think that for sure, you don't get there by starting off cold, no prep. You need to practice it. But there is something to be said for getting yourself to that place where you're confident riffing. Like part of it is mental too.
Yeah, all of it is mental. And again, all of it is not being attached to the things that you have prepared. Like those goblins. I literally made them 15 weeks ago. and they sat in a folder. And if no one ever went there, it wouldn't have hurt my feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't wedded to the idea, and I haven't been laying hooks on these guys, every
And they
couple
didn't have a
weeks.
patron, right?
And they didn't have a patron. They didn't have anyone pushing.
Because if they'd had a patron, then they'd been like, okay, well, we need to go out and get wives and make more goblins, and like they could have become a real problem.
Yes, yes, they could have. And there are downtime players who are creating problems for the parties that the parties aren't even aware of. They don't even know that these things are out there because
Are there
they're
any problems that you
not
can
public.
share that aren't part of the fog of war, like old problems that patrons like inflicted upon?
There was a pirate patron who had to drop out due to other commitments. So there was a pirate king, and that we were working towards developing something along those lines. There's also this campaign map is in is in one country, and then the bordering country to the east is at war with the country to their east. So there's an actual war going on right now off
That's so
screen.
awesome. That is so awesome.
And so I don't know when. I haven't decided yet how I'm going to determine this, but there's going to be waves of refugees coming in
Oh my gosh.
from the east at some point from this war, which is I don't know. I don't know how I'm going to handle that yet, which is really exciting for me because I don't know who's going to win, and I'm also looking forward to setting up some armies on the table and making videos of these armies duking it out. I might use chainmail for it. I might use Commands and Colors Ancients, or I might use Commands and Colors Ancients pieces with chainmail rules. We'll see.
Interesting. That's like for me one of the best things about this Broasar style of play is you get stories that nobody else gets, and enviable stories, right? Like I can run Curse of Strahd and then tell my buddy, yeah, no, it was crazy. We went to this old lady and she was reading our tarot cards, and the guy's like, yeah, that's what happens in Curse of Strahd. And then we fought the vampire at the end, but first we had to go to the old bone grinder. And yeah, that's what happens in Curse of Strahd. It's like an episode. But you guys are like, yeah, once we cleared out the goblins, we thought everything was great until all of these refugees started pouring into our borders, and then what we were going to do. And it's like, nobody else has that story. Like that is so unique to what is going on in your crazy world.
Right. Well, and there's another artifact of having multiple parties in the same world.
Yeah.
And everyone has to wait until November 17th because it's embargoed. But that is going to be a watershed moment. And I need to get it right. I did actually record. I did record that session, so I have a voice recording of what happened and the negotiations that went on. And so I'm working on putting together a multimedia presentation for that. So I've got another month.
I love
But
it.
it's I'm sure it's happened. Things like this have happened in other campaigns. It's the first time it's happened in one of mine. So I'm pretty psyched about it. But it definitely changed the complexion of the entire campaign.
This is a stupid analogy, but it just occurred to me, and it feels true in the moment. So please, correct me if this is wrong. But it feels to me like the difference between watching a scripted show or a sitcom and watching reality TV like Survivor. Right? Like I've got buddies that love Critical Role. Like they just enjoy it, and when I see them, they want to tell me about it. And like I've tried watching that, and it just doesn't do it for me. I'm sorry, it just doesn't. And I'm sorry if I offend anyone, but like it's just not. It's not my thing. But my Critical Role has been reading session reports from like Dubseron and Trollopolis, and like I literally can't wait. Um, Mr. Wargaming's blow by blow what's going to happen with Stormbringer or Soul Drinker, or whatever the sword was that was going towards the sun. Like that was riveting to me, and it felt historical and powerful, and it mattered, and it meant something. And Yeah, so I guess for me, like, I legit enjoy reading session reports and watching these videos, these artifacts that you guys create
Yeah,
from the games.
the
This
Stormbringer
arrived.
battle was literally I mean that was the first thing I looked at when I woke up.
Yeah, yeah. You just wake up and you're like your brain's already lit up. This I got my copy of the Relics of the Kangsta, 16 inspiring diss tracks from Brovenloft. I wasn't even part of the first Brovenloft. I was only just becoming tangentially aware of the Broasar when this was happening. But I think the stuff that happens in these type of games is jaw dropping and hilarious. And I don't know why. And I kind of asked this question on the last one. It seems like the people that give it a shot and try it, not only do they enjoy it, but they go on to start their own campaigns in this one-to-one style. But I don't know why this still remains so niche. Why so many people just don't get it and want to play with that small group mono party. Have you bumped into that, or
I have conversations with folks on Twitter, and I think part of it is that it does take a little more time than your normal game. And it also takes a little more of an investment in terms of being involved and being immersed. And it's a completely different sort of immersion. Because yes, you will think about your character that you can't even play for 2 weeks because they've gone into the future. And so you're playing someone else, but this guy's really into some cool stuff too. And then next week you go and play a brand new character because both of your other characters are in time jail, and that one gets killed in a total party kill by some eldritch being. And it's like, wow, I'm so glad that my other character wasn't here because they all died. It's really I don't know. It's compelling, and you honestly do think about it more often. And I know that there are a lot of people, and I was in that boat for years when I didn't play miniature games, I didn't play role-playing games, I didn't do much gaming at all. I did a little bit of miniature painting. But there was a stretch of about 5 years when I was just buried in my career. I was working 60 plus hours a week. I didn't hobby at all. I just didn't have time. And then any free time that I did have, I spent with my wife because that was what was important. As a semi-retired person now, I do have the luxury of doing a lot of this prep. And I enjoy it. And it's a creative outlet. Not only do I get to draw maps, I think my mapping skills have improved immensely. Am I a professional?
It's way better than anything I could do. Right?
Am I a professional cartographer? No.
But you can make Tolkien mountains. Look at those.
And you know what? I practiced those for a long time, and I learned how to do that from a video. So you can learn. You can learn that too. It's a YouTube video. It's not as hard as it looks. You just need the right tools, and that's the important thing. Get some. What are they called? Tombow water-based brush, double-headed brush markers. So one end is a brush, looks like a number 5 or number 6 size brush, and then the other end is a medium point, like just a medium point felt tip. And they come in different shades of gray. You can get like 16 different shades of gray.
Nice.
Which allows you to make mountains that look like that.
I bet they sold a bunch of them at the beginning of the year with the Dungeon 23 stuff.
I'll bet they did.
Yeah.
They did. And I'm kind of sad about Dungeon 23 because I started strong, but when Tannisboard came up and I had to start doing 2 sessions a week, I didn't have. Again, here we are. I had to prioritize. I wanted to do Dungeon 23, but I also needed to start up this campaign and get this running 2 nights a week. That took a lot of time, so I couldn't. I had to drop out of the Dungeon 23. However, I do have a plan for Dungeon 24.
Cool.
I do.
Well, it's not too late to catch up. You still got a couple months.
Just do but I'm not going to go back to March. What is that? April, May, July, August.
Is there a chat GPT for dungeon level?
You can make dungeons with chat GPT. They are not that good, but you can do it. I
I'm
made a
sure.
sample. I made a sample, and we discussed it on. I think it was the Clerics Wear Ringmail Discord, and
Rock on.
we I made a little dungeon with Chat GPT, and we dissected it. So
All right, so here's a thought I had about prep. Um, I went through a 5e phase and it just wasn't doing it for me. And then I tried the OSR and I bought a ton of modules. Just anything that was on questing base that he said this is really good, or 10-foot pole. That he gave it the best rating. Um, and now I'm like, I don't. Maybe I should just learn the concept of sunk cost, because I do feel like playing the stuff that you create is more satisfying than playing modules. But part of me wants to just get a huge hex map and just like pick my favorites of the stuff that I bought and never played and just plop those down.
do it. Do it.
Do it.
Absolutely do it.
All right.
When I started the World of Weird campaign, that was about 3 years ago, and I chose low fantasy gaming on purpose because I wanted to give the game a different feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's set in a Mediterranean setting, similar to Shoyenka, um, because I didn't want it to feel like that Germanic, British, Northern European. I didn't want it to have. I didn't want it to have that feel, that aesthetic.
Yeah.
And so I figured, if I use a different rule set, it will break people out of the thing. And then if I tell people what the clothing styles are and what the languages are and that sort of thing, we can,
That
and the
flavor.
architecture, we can create a whole new flavor.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't really matter what rules you're using, because what matters is how you present that aesthetic. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's where the most important prep comes in, is knowing how to describe something. So if you see a temple and you don't want it to look like a Roman temple, then you need to understand, what a Byzantine temple looks like, or what a Shinto temple looks like. And so that's where the most important prep comes in. But Alchemic Rakers right here, go through all the modules and make random tables. One of the things I did with the World of Worth campaign is Stephen Grodzicki has put together a list of what he calls adventure frameworks. And they're not really, it's like a 3-page dungeon instead of a 1-page dungeon, but they're not all dungeons. Some of them are wilderness encounters, and they're absolutely brilliant. He's got them separated out by terrain type.
What is it called again?
They're called adventure frameworks. I think you can get it on drive-through. I think it's called the Adventure Framework book. It's on drive-through.
Okay.
And there's like, I don't know, 80 or 100 of these, and they're just short encounters or small dungeons that are very basically laid out. 7 rooms. Room A has a cockatrice. Room B has a tomb with a white or whatever. And so if you get stuck, you can grab one of these and throw it into your session, and no one will know.
Yeah.
And if you don't even have to be really familiar with it, because it's not that detailed. It has just a sketch of each little place that you can look over in 5 minutes while the players are deciding on their marching order, and then what is ahead, and then you can embellish it with your own knowledge of the setting that you have.
I don't know how I missed this comment. This is a good one from Alchemic Raker as well. You have to trust that the rules themselves can create good experience. Players' ridiculous ideas plus the rules equal totally unexpected outcomes,
Yes.
but still somehow great success.
Yes, absolutely.
And like I've noticed in Trolopulus, sometimes you have a few dull sessions in a row where you don't have the fireworks and it's not all crazy. It's just like, okay, we went into the dungeon. We only got so much before we had to leave. One guy died. Not much happened. But there just comes this moment where I don't know if it's 3 or 4 or 7 sessions in, but like all of the stuff that had happened up starts to hook together and just go absolute nuts bonkers. And you just got to trust the process and get through those, get through the part where all the ingredients are coming in before the collective subconscious of you and all your friends turn it into something that is unexpected and beyond any of your expectations for what would have happened. I don't know how else to put it other than that. I feel like I'm not doing a good job describing it, but I've seen it happen.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have a session where you spend more time positioning for the next session or positioning for the big raid.
Hmm.
And I don't know if that is an artifact of people being familiar with video game style play, um,
Yeah, maybe.
or if it just happens that way because okay, we have to, it's going to take 3 weeks to get everyone together. We have to recruit all these soldiers. We have to get ballista made. We have to find a bunch of pigs and rats, or whatever. They got to round up all this stuff for their cockamamie plan. Um,
Help me put a bunch of rats in this bag. Okay, on it.
um, I mean, I mean, as an example, the Thursday group spent 2 sessions in a row where they literally got no treasure whatsoever, trying to penetrate the mysteries of the necropolis.
Hmm.
And through a couple of poor choices and then also poor timing, which they had no control over, because the necropolis itself, its influence on the region around it waxes and wanes with the moon.
Ooh,
So
okay.
depending on when you go there will alter the danger level. Um, and I've also, well, I'm going to keep that a secret.
Fair enough.
But in any case, they spent 2 sessions in a row going there and then, camping close by and getting attacked by monsters and like basically driven off in the night and fleeing for their lives because they weren't able to get in past the obstacles before nightfall. And then they decided to just go ahead and camp. And then they had to face the darkness.
Well, in the failure, I think that adds to the next attempt as far as how important it is, or we had one. I was playing. Dornell was DMing it, and like we got into the dungeon, and then we got to this room that was locked. It was like a jail cell almost, and there was orcs all around, and they could just shoot in there and pincushion us. And so we had to run. And so then they came chasing us, and everyone was just like holding as much loot as they could, just running as fast as they could. And he added the one little detail that the orcs, while they were chasing us, were laughing. They were laughing at us. And like we almost didn't make it out, but we did. But like, man, did we hate those orcs? We were like, we are gonna go back in there and settle their hash. And like, the failure adds weight to the next session. It like propels it.
Well, ask any of the Dubzaron veterans because I'll tell you what, there was several encounters with hags in the forest, and after they killed several characters, the minute we figured out that an encounter was the hags, we went into assault mode.
Yeah.
And it sometimes more than once it derailed the entire adventure. We spent the whole adventure fighting the hags and then limping back home. We hated them. We hated them.
Man, I knew this was going to happen. I knew, like, when I just started researching you on Twitter, like I was like, okay, just for the record, guys, we try to do an hour.
2 hours. It's
This
2 hours.
and here we are,
Super
2 hours.
fun. Super fun though. Great questions. Great
Yeah.
questions.
So the one I always like to ask, is there a session that you think back to, like when someone asks you, or even when you ask yourself, what is it about this hobby? Like, what are the kind of memories we create? Is there a session that really stands out and one that you can share? That you're like, man, this is what it's about. This thing happened and it was so crazy or funny or hilarious or scary or whatever. Like, what is it? What is the one that your mind goes to when I ask this kind of question? If you wouldn't mind sharing.
I think the best session that I've had in the last few years was in the World of Wirth campaign, and the party were acting belligerent in town, and they got themselves captured and put into a tower in the castle, and they were prisoners in a sense. And one of the characters, who was a thief, who was kind of suicidal, started smarting off to basically the woman who was in charge of this whole area. And so she threw him in the dungeon itself. and he had made preparations in advance, weeks and months before, for, if he ever gets caught, he's got thieves' tools hidden here and hidden there, and secreted things, and he's got special, he was ready to escape if anything ever happened. And so we actually got to play the classic jailbreak session, which I had never run before. He'd never played before. And we all got super excited. I asked him to make about 15 rolls in advance so that we could play this in the background while the rest of the party was doing other things, and he was doing his jailbreak so it could go on. And so I was doing the jailbreak session with him in Discord private chat while we were doing the rest of the party's adventure, because they were attending a like a masquerade ball or something like that. And
man,
sneaking away from that, going into the
that's a high cognitive load, man. Do it like
they went into the vizier's chambers, and they looted her office, and they stole a couple of magic items and some maps and stuff, and went out the window. And so we were applying these rolls in the order that he had done them, and he rescued some people from down below, and he managed to escape. One of the prisoners that was trying to escape was killed. It was a close thing, and then they had to fight through a riot that got started by a faction with a patron who was trying to disrupt things in town. And so they barely managed to escape with their lives. They had to steal a boat and sail down the river. It was super cool. It was really exciting.
I don't even, man, how on earth? Because it's not like it's even just a normal encounter, like a masquerade ball. That's a ton of NPCs. That's probably a lot of social encounters, and the whole time you're like texting this guy on the back channel about how he's trying to escape.
Yeah. Well, the good news was, I don't want to call it a railroad, but because they were prisoners in the castle.
Yeah. Okay.
They were going to be attendees at this ball, and so I had done some prep and gathered a bunch of pictures and things like that, and I had written out some little speeches and the various toasts.
Cool.
So those were all done in advance, because now, if that hadn't happened, if they had decided to just sneak out the back and leave and abandon their friend, well, then I don't need that stuff, and that would have been a different adventure altogether. But they didn't do that. They created a distraction so that he could escape from the dungeon, which was really cool.
That's awesome.
I think that's probably the all-time best session I've ever played.
Do you ever talk to players that bring it up again?
We talked about it a couple times while that campaign was going, but now that we're doing the Tannisborg Shoyenka campaign, all the focus is on this one, and they're kind of peeved about one of the characters down in the dungeon. So,
well, cool. Here I am. Alchemic Raker said that jailbreak session sounds awesome. And like that kind of goes to what I was saying earlier. Like this kind of play just generates enviable stories. Like that's some of the receipts that we can show. Like does your game do this?
Yeah, absolutely. And the fun part about that is, while they were trapped in the castle, it was one time. So we were playing through several days in a session, and then we would end the session because they weren't going anywhere, so they were safe, and so they could text me throughout the week, or message me throughout the week on Discord of other things they wanted to do, and plans that they were trying to make for this escape. And so it was, when it finally came time for that session, not only had I done a bunch of prep, but they had done a bunch of prep. And so they had a plan. They stuck to it. They were focused. They were disciplined.
All that energy towards game night.
Yeah, and I want to say it lasted 3 or 4 weeks. So it was pretty cool.
That is cool. All right. Is there anything else that we needed to talk about as far as prep, how you do it? I really appreciate you giving me an extra hour.
No problem, man. It's all right. I don't have to work tomorrow, so I get to sleep then.
Is there anything I should have asked you and I missed? I forgot in my zeal.
No, the only other thing is I'm looking at the patron chat from Buro Oriental Adventures, and it mentions a patron handbook and a session player handbook. And I think that's a super important idea.
Yeah.
So if you decide that you want to add downtime players to your campaign, before you do, put together a little handbook that describes what it is you want them to do and what
Yeah.
kind of thing you're going for.
And the timing.
If you want, you can go on the Shadow over Sojenka blog, and there is a page called How to Play Factions, and
Yeah.
that's my resource for people that want to be patrons in my game. And so it explains what factions are, what the domain game is, how it begins with session 1, why would you create a faction, how do you build a faction, what does your faction do. um, I don't know how many words it is. It's not many. It looks like it might be 2 pages of text if you printed it out.
Yeah.
At least it's a guide. And then
Get them in the
once
right
you
mind.
get in the Discord, I have that other page that has the layout for what your turn is.
Mm-hmm.
And so having that as a resource, and I think somebody in here said that because they get to play on their own, they like being a patron because they get to play on their own and they just have to touch base when they need to do a die roll or whatever. But like, for
Yeah. There's
instance,
been a lot of comments.
when I had the Pirate King, he rolled up an encounter and said, "Oh, I've run into a few enemy warships. What do I do?" I'm like, "Oh, here." I said, "I have a quick play sheet for Tony Bass rules," and I threw it in the Discord. I'm like, "This is how you play it." I said, "Here, I have a video because I played these rules. You can watch the video to learn how to play." And then he played it with his nephew. He actually played the battle out with his nephew
That's awesome.
for the campaign.
I'd say even like, man, this what you're sharing is awesome, and I feel like that would have helped in Bro Oriental Adventures, has something like that to hand people. And if you know the system you're playing, you can even, for those thinking about doing this, put the references in there, put the page numbers in there, and say, all right, you're going to deal with your income as per Adventure Conquer King system, page 254. Here's where it talks about what level you can be, how many troops you have, what resources you have, and yeah, just offload a lot of that back and forth that normally they would just be pestering you about. Where you say, "Here's your rules, here's where you follow them, and here's what's expected of you," and then just come to me with the stuff that needs adjudication, right? And I'll let you know what the random stuff that happens to you in the meantime is.
Right. I mean, because I have one downtime player who's doing something that I don't really. How do I put this? It doesn't match my idea of what the NPC was when we created it,
Yeah,
but they're doing their own thing with it and they like it, and I'm happy that they're doing it and they're invested and they're immersed. And so let it run, because you know what? They're doing things I would not have thought of.
yeah.
That's what makes it exciting.
Oh, faction players are so much more dangerous than your NPCs, right? Like I've shared a couple times about me the Keep on the Borderlands that I'm playing, where, and the one I brought up is the guy that's running the kobold that wanted an ogre, but the other guy, and I hope my players aren't watching because this I am going to be spoiling something for them. The guy that's playing the backstabby priest, they're not sure if he really messed him over or not on that first one, because the way it fell out, it could have just been the kobolds getting the drop on him. But I asked him what he wants to do now, knowing that things have progressed and that the guy got released. And he said, "Well, my guy's going to be trying to sneak into the keep and to poison their water supply. And as the priest, he's going to be like stockpiling fresh water in his, in barrels and stuff around, so that like when the water supply gets poisoned, he's going to act like he's cleansing it and then give out the good water." It's like, I never would. That is diabolical, man. I never would have come up with that. And I don't know what the players are going to do. And so it's like,
fantastic.
what do you do when the entire keep on the borderland, all the people inside it have their runs,
Right. Well, you know what? And it's funny because Dubs did it first that I know of in the recent past, where the bad guys actually attacked the keep on the Borderlands. And in the World of Worth campaign, I had a patron who was running the evil priest, and he assembled an army, and he spent months doing it, like literally months of real, in real life time. And then he attacked it and did a siege. And it just so happened that and it was totally luck that it worked out this way. But the player party was actually in the keep when the attack came, and one of the patrons' agents was in the keep as well to sow discord, and she spotted the characters who were getting ready to do a thing, and they had already just robbed one of the other people in the keep, and she wanted to keep them away from the walls where they could do damage to the invasion, so she led them downstairs into a secret like dungeon area beneath.
Nice.
And I made a like a four episode video of the siege of that using chainmail rules and wooden tokens. So
Brilliant.
that was a lot of fun playing that out.
All right, man.
So
That's
yeah,
all the questions
this hobby's unlimited, man. There's so many things you can
It
do,
is.
and I don't know, I love it, and I'm gonna keep doing it until I die.
Right on, bro. And I had such a fun time. Thank you for coming on my show.
Right.
And
Thanks for
sharing
having me. I appreciate it. I hope people
secrets.
learned something. And again, if you've got questions, hit me up, and I will do my very best to answer them and share them as much as I can to spread the word.
Excellent. All right. Have a good night, guys. We'll see you
Have
next
a good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.